I was born in Berlin,
Berlin.
Wisconsin. Still is a small town about 100 miles from Milwaukee, and my father and mother had lived there their whole lives. Actually, their parents came from Austria and Poland, and they came to, I guess, Chicago, and then apparently people in Chicago knew that the Wisconsin area, in that area of Berlin, had weather and land, dirt, that was sort of like where they lived, and that they could grow the same crops that they did back in the old country. And so a lot of German and Polish people settled in and around Berlin. And so that's how they got there. And then I was born in 1937, when the Depression was still on. And my father had found a job in Milwaukee. So the next idea was to move everybody to Milwaukee. And so from the time I was probably 7 or 8 months old, I lived in Milwaukee. And we lived near the 27th Street streetcar line, because that was the streetcar my father took to work to go to A.O. Smith factory. Before the war, A.O. Smith made corn silos, giant corn silos, and they made farm equipment. And then when the war started, it all transferred to tanks and bombs. And my father was a welder. He was not a good father, but he was a good welder. And he evidently was one of the people that would climb inside these giant, they called them blockbuster bombs. They were big enough for a human to get inside and weld from the inside.
And
weld
that
the
was something
seams.
he did.
Yeah, so that's what he did, and he was very proud of it. He did not like the women that worked in the factory, because they were the Rosies.
Right.
And they would do the same kind of work that he would do, and he would always say that they shouldn't be there, and that. Anyway, it was very interesting, because from a young person on, I would always disagree with my father on everything because I didn't like him. So so if he said women didn't belong somewhere,
then you figured they
I
did.
figured they did. So anyway,
It's an interesting sort of inspiration for that lifelong commitment.
I guess, but that wasn't really the inspiration.
Yeah.
It was just, but he was a very strong union man, and he didn't go to union meetings, but he did go to. They'd have like annual Christmas parties and stuff. So I remember going to one of those.
Do you know what union?
Very good question. It might have been a steel workers or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Not something a child would necessarily remember.
No, I don't know what union it was. That's interesting. I don't know. But yeah, he was a strong union person.
And that's something that you...
Well, I think somewhere in my mind, I probably thought that he had the same job for as long as I knew him, until he retired.
Mm-hmm.
So somewhere in my mind, I probably connected the fact that it was a factory job, it was a good job, and it was a union job. So, and
Makes sense.
we weren't starving, we didn't have very much money because he spent a lot of it at the tavern, but we weren't, I would say we weren't like poor. We were just sort of on the edge.
You said you moved a lot.
Yes, we moved every couple years. Sometimes, I think we started out on 28th and Brown. We went to 29th and Brown. We went to 30th and Brown. And that was the year my mother died, and then we moved out of the neighborhood and to a couple other places that I can't remember exactly where they were.
So, how old were you when your mother died?
I had just turned 14. Because I was just going to start ninth grade. And it's the first year of high school, but the school that I was in just started a ninth grade for girls. So I just stayed there, and then it was a Catholic school, and so then a bunch of the girls decided to stay, I guess, and it was actually a very nice year, just having all girls in the class.
Yeah.
So I've never thought about it in that way that much before, but the difference between the 8 years previous where there was boys and then the year of the girls, there was a lot more art. There was a lot more homework getting done. It was kind of fun.
Huh.
So anyway, I loved school. I always did. I loved school.
All the way through high school. And you went to Catholic school all the way through?
I went to Catholic school, Catholic high school too. St. John's Cathedral in downtown Milwaukee was the working class Catholic school. It was free or very, very cheap, and it was a good school. You learned a lot. I mean, I've said that even though I didn't go to college, my years in high school, I mean, were equal to some people I've known that have gone to a couple more years of college. So, because that was back in the 40s and the 50s. So maybe it was easier. I don't know.
Did you, when you were in high school, did you ever think you might want to go to college, or did your
Never.
parents have any ideas, or you, about your future?
No. My father, it was just my father at that point, and I would just wanted to keep him out of the school completely, because of how he was. So.
Did you have siblings?
I had an older sister, 15 years older. She's still living. She's 90.
Wow.
She lives in Maryland, and I see her every couple of years. It's hard to get out there now. It's so far.
Yeah.
And our brother was 6 years older than I was, and he died when he was 21. He got pneumonia in northern Wisconsin. I think it was near Rhinelander. He was on a fishing and hunting trip, and he got sick. And in those days, they didn't have penicillin, so they didn't know what was wrong with him, and he died. But he was a good brother.
So when you were in school, you loved studying, but you didn't have, nobody ever suggested that you might be able to go on beyond high school?
Most of the girls, a lot of the girls became nuns. There was a whole section became nuns. The career path they had for girls was typing and shorthand, was office work and bookkeeping. So that's, in the last 2 years of high school, that's what they concentrated on teaching. And the boys, not that many people in my class went to college. They were working class kids that when they got out, the boys got jobs in factories and the girls got jobs in offices. And then immediately got married and pregnant. So that was, nobody questioned it really. And I went to a couple reunions, and there were some boys that did go to college, and a couple of them, one of them is a dentist and one of them was a doctor, I think. So it probably was the family encouraging them or something to do it. But there really wasn't anybody telling us you have to take 2 science classes so that you can get to wherever. No.
They already had you categorized in terms of
Yeah.
going to go into.
Yeah, and I think it's also nobody had money. And I don't even remember anybody talking about student loans.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if there was student loans. I sound like I lived in a cave time.
Well, there
But
were
I
some
really-
scholarships, some places, but
Oh, scholarships. Okay, so I suppose some of the people got scholarships.
maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe those couple of boys who went on were the recipients.
Yeah, it could be.
So you graduated?
Oh yeah. I was at National Honor Society. I had I loved studying and I loved school. I would come early and leave late. So
And did you work while you were in school, or?
no, my father would not allow me to get a job. I wanted to get a job at a dry cleaner because there was a sign in the window that they wanted somebody to clerk, And I told the guy I could start the next week, and it was fine. And then he happened to mention it to my father, because I was going to just do it and not tell my father. But then, when my father found out, he told the guy that he'd beat the shit out of him if he hired me. So that was the end of that.
Oh dear.
So it wasn't until I basically got out of his house that I was able to, when I was 18, and I could leave.
Which was right around when you graduated high school?
Yeah, that was the summer I graduated high school. So, and actually Sugar String, that book talks a lot about that.
Okay.
So,
So what was your first job then?
first job was at Golden Guernsey Dairy, and it was in the kind of machinery department. It was called the addressograph department,
Mm-hmm.
and the boss, that was like the office manager's name was Mr. Geckerman, really nice old guy, and he hired me to do regular office work like typing and shorthand and everything, and answering phones. And I was so nervous that I was a nervous wreck. I couldn't hardly talk on the phone. I just remember "Dear Sir," which I can still do in shorthand, but that was about it. But he liked me, so he said, "Well, there's an opening in the machine department, in the addressograph department." So what we did in that department was print the route books for the milkmen, and they were all men, and always having to keep their route books up to date. There was little, you know what soldiers' dog tags look like? These little pieces of metal about that big. Well, that's what a addressograph plate looked like, and you stick the plate into this machine, and you could type on it, but the typing was like kagalunk, kagalunk,
Because you were actually making the impression.
You're making
You
an
were
impression
typing
into the metal.
Got it. And so you had one of those for each customer on
Yes.
each route.
On each route, and then each milkman's route was in like a drawer full of addressograph plates, and then you take that whole drawer and you put it into this printing machine, and then it would just print out the pages of the route book. So I did that, and I ran. I started a newsletter there, and we had what do you call it, mimeograph. And before the mimeograph machine, that was like typing on these plastic sheets, or they weren't plastic, it was like waxy with a paper backing, and then you'd put that in the typewriter and you type on it and it would make impressions.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's what you put in that. But then before that one, there was this purple colored thing. I can't remember what you used to call it. But so there were several different kinds of machines, and they were always breaking down. And that was the other thing.
Who was the newsletter for?
The newsletter was for the office and the milkman. So it was like just office stuff. So-and-so's going to have to quit because she's going to have a baby. Just, I don't know, different stuff like that. And the milkmen would give me stories about people that they'd meet on their route. So, but that wasn't the first newsletter I edited. The first newsletter was in high school. So I've always
You had
edited
newsletters in your life.
Yes, newsletters in my blood.
That's very impressive. So how long did you stay there?
At Golden Guernsey, probably 2 or maybe 18, 19, 20, just about 2.5 years. Because then I got married and pregnant. And so I was one of the people, one of the women that couldn't keep on working. So
How did you meet your husband?
that was my first husband. He was a brother of my best girlfriend, who I went to grade school and high school with, and her name is Mary Ellen, and I still talk to her once a week at least.
Isn't that great?
Oakland to Milwaukee, yes.
She's still Midwest.
He's still in the Midwest. She doesn't travel. Not too many of the people from our class went out of the Midwest.
Went very far. Yeah.
Right.
So you got married and had to quit when you got pregnant?
Yes. Yes. And then I just had babies, one after another, because we were Catholic and because the doctors were all Catholic. Everybody was Catholic that I knew.
Did you?
And they would not allow you to use anything.
Did you know about it?
Did I know about it? Well, I knew about rubbers, which my ex-husband wouldn't use. So every time I got pregnant, it was my fault. I got pregnant. I know it sounds so silly when you say it, but that's what he would say. So then, before in between my daughter and my last son.
I'm sorry to
Sure.
interrupt, but if there had been a Planned Parenthood clinic in your community,
Would I have gone?
would you have gone?
After the third kid was born, yes. There wasn't any place. There
I
was no place, and there was no.
But I'm just wondering if
there was no pill.
The thought.
There was no diaphragm. There was no pill. There was nothing. So except rubbers.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. Condoms, which women couldn't buy in the drugstore. And so the man had to buy them. The way it was. So after Linda was born, I finally found, because I had been searching for a doctor who wasn't Catholic. So I finally found, I think, I'm not sure what religion he was. He didn't say. All I knew was that I could finally get birth control pills. They had just come out.
Hmm.
And the birth control pills in those days were full of either progesterone or estrogen or whatever the heck it was.
It's very high dose.
The
Yeah.
high doses, because we were guinea pigs.
Mm-hmm.
So, and their theory was, if you're dealing with a Catholic woman, it has to be, the prescription cannot be a long-term prescription. It was 3 months, and at the end of 3 months, supposedly, when you stopped, this is so stupid, when you stopped taking the pill, your body would be regular, your menstrual period would be regular, so that you could practice the rhythm method, which is what Catholic wanted you to practice.
Yeah.
Right, which is a complete joke. So what they didn't tell you, and what women like me, were guinea pigs for, after 3 months, you were ovulating more during the month So it not only didn't get you regular, it screwed your insides up bad. And so I got pregnant. As soon as I stopped taking the pill, I got pregnant immediately with my last boy. And that was really the limit of this. I mean, I stopped seeing that doctor. And I think when I was in the hospital with that birth, I was asking a nurse, where can I go to get birth control pills? Just take birth control pills. And she says, well, you know that the church doesn't blah, blah, blah. And I said, I don't care. I really don't care. So I got on birth control pills, and then I was on them for quite a while. And then I got really bad tumors in my uterus from that whole guinea pig part of taking the pill, the dosage in the pill thing, you know. So then I ended up having to get a hysterectomy, which my girlfriend said, oh, you poor thing, you're going to get a hysterectomy. I was so happy to get a hysterectomy. It hurt like hell. And I had like a scar from my belly button all the way down because the doctor could not, not verify, what's the word? Could not say they were giving me a hysterectomy because I was Catholic and I could still have a baby. So even though I had tumors, I could still have a baby. So what they did is they said it's going to be exploratory surgery. And that's why I had such a big incision, because they opened me up to see what else was wrong. Well, of course there wasn't anything else wrong. It was just that my uterus was...
Was this a Catholic hospital?
What wasn't a Catholic hospital there? I mean, I'm exaggerating. I'm sure there was, but they were always St. Mary this or St. Cecilia that or something.
I never knew that they couldn't do a hysterectomy.
Well, if this is a woman doctor, which I had finally found a woman doctor, she was lying to me. I have no idea.
No, it makes perfect sense. It's not something I knew about. Oh,
yeah, right. By that time, I was already working in a factory. I was working at Hellwig, my first factory job.
So tell me, so you had children. You had children and stayed home with them.
Yes, because my first husband, wouldn't let me get a job either. Now, funny thing about him, when he deserted the kids and I, then he wanted me to get a job. So he wouldn't have to pay any child support.
Oh dear. And how many years into the marriage was that?
13.
13.
Yeah.
So for 13 years you stayed home with
the kids.
With the kids.
Right. And I did everything in the house. I did all the roof repair. I did all the bicycle repair. I did house repair. Anything that was broken, I fixed.
So you had an inclination for...
Well, and I liked it.
Yeah.
And if I waited for him to fix it, it would never get fixed. So it was a win-win situation in a kind of an odd way. Mm-hmm. You know.
So then he leaves.
Yeah,
and
he leaves.
Go looking for a job.
And in between when he left and I finally got into a training program so that I could get a machine shop type job. The reason I don't think I've told this to people before, but you might as well know this too. I had no money, and my ex-husband would drop off money in strange ways. He would wait outside the kids' school and give a bag of money to the little one. Danny would be coming out of kindergarten, and the school was like a block away. In those days, kids walked back and forth to school.
Yeah.
And so Danny came home with this bag of $1 bills. It was $100 in it, and said, "Daddy gave us money. Daddy gave us money," and $100. And it didn't it didn't pay for hardly anything. So I had gotten on food stamps. They wouldn't let me get in the welfare because I didn't have any kind of regular money coming in. If Jim had said that he would pay child support on a regular basis, then the welfare department could have said, okay, that's what's happening, and then we'll give you such and such. But the way they worked it back then, you were stuck. So you got food stamps. Mm. So the food stamps were never enough either for the 5 kids because it just wasn't enough food. So I started shoplifting. And I would shoplift hamburger, meat, anything that was more expensive, you know. And so anyway, I got caught shoplifting. So I got sent to, I didn't get to have to go to jail or anything, thank goodness. But the judge was like a hanging judge. He was terrible. And so the one thing I remember from the court-appointed attorney I had was ask for a change of venue. So that was what was going in my head. As soon as they called my name, I was supposed to say, change of venue, because then I would get some other judge. So that's what I did. And the other judge, then I got another attorney, another court-appointed attorney. And that idiot, he was trying to save time and energy for himself, I guess. So he put me, who had shoplifted $7.35 worth of hamburger meat and some various, a baseball mitt, because it was I'm not going to say the store I was at, but it was one of my son's birthdays, and I wanted to get him a baseball mitt, and I had no money. So I shoplifted the goddamn birthday. But anyway, so there's me with $7.35, and there's a man who had done armed robbery of a gas station with a gun for a couple $1,000s, right, in the gas station. So here we are in this together thing, and the judge is going to make a decision on what happens to us. So I got a year's probation, and he got a year's probation. Yeah, that was the justice system.
Oh my goodness.
So the good thing about that, which I'm always doing in my whole life, I always try and find the good thing about something. The good thing about that is that my probation officer was a really nice guy and could see what happened and everything. So he told me about the Milwaukee Technical Schools federal program called MTDA, Manpower Training Development Act. And there was 2 kinds of things. There was the secretarial one for the girls, and there was the machine shop one, machine shop and welding and stuff for the boys, the men. Okay, I'm being silly. And so I said, in no way am I going to go. I know what I can do in an office, and it's not pretty. I'm just going to just make a mess of it. So he didn't want to send me to that one, but I insisted. And that's how I got into...
So he sent you to the training?
Yeah, so I went to the training. It was a paid training. We finally had money. We finally had food in the house. I loved the training.
Did anybody there object to your being a woman?
The teachers had a fit. Teachers didn't. I was the first woman to go through the training. So the guys in the class were very nice. They were mostly Vietnam vets, and they had come home, and they didn't know what they wanted to do with their lives. They were druggies. They were just a big mess. But they thought it was funny to use me to screw around with the teacher. So when the teacher would be not wanting to train me on a particular machine because no woman ever did that, and so why should you do it? when the teacher would be gone for periods of time, the vets would show me how to run the machines.
Hmm.
So basically, the vets are the ones that, I get teary-eyed. It's like they were great.
So they taught you.
Oh yeah. They were really good, and they made a lot of brass pop pipes when the teacher wasn't there. They had a whole marijuana pot pipe business going on the side. And the teacher never could figure out where all the brass went.
That's very funny.
Yes, it is. It's very funny.
So how long was the training?
Oh, it was almost a year. It was a good hunk of time. And then I got my first job at Hellwig Carbon Company.
And did everybody who graduated from that would probably going to get a job?
If they wanted one. I think some of the guys, I'm not sure they could work. They
might have been disabled veterans.
Yeah, they had such flashbacks and stuff.
Mm.
A lot of them were in bad shape.
Mm.
So
you looked for a job, and did anybody raise their eyebrows?
Oh yeah. There's the one I remember, I must have went to 30, 40 places.
Wow.
And
that's a lot.
And
these are places with job openings.
Oh yeah, right. We don't hire women for those jobs. We just don't. Don't even bother filling out an application. So one place, actually, I insisted on filling out an application. And it was a big factory. And it was on the south side of Milwaukee. Milwaukee is, and still is, a divided city. There's a river that goes down it, and there's bridges and viaducts all over the place. And certain ethnicities lived on one spot, and another ethnicity lived on another spot. And actually, when I was living in Milwaukee, up to the middle 70s, there was still closed housing. That African American population had to live in a certain section of town by law. And there was big demonstrations and marches, which I was part of for years, to get rid of the closed housing. But so anyway, on the south side, it was mostly Hispanic people. And there was the main street on the south side was National Avenue. Maybe it still is, I don't know. And the factory was nearby that area. I can't remember the name of the factory. I got in for the interview, and the guy looked at my application, set it down. He said, "I do not hire women or Mexicans off of National Avenue." And that was it. So, just didn't do it. So, in order to get my job at Hellwig, there was a nice teacher that I never got, but that was part of helping you do job hunting. Mm-hmm. And he couldn't believe that I was having such a hard time getting work because he knew I was really good, but I just couldn't get it because they didn't want to hire a woman. So he put in a good word for me at Hellwig, and Hellwig was, oh my goodness, Hellwig was like a feudal system. The owner still was there in the factory. The owner would come, if the owner didn't like you, he would tap you on your back and say you're fired, and you were gone. You have no recourse, you're gone. So, but they had just got a government contract, and this was in like 1973 or something like that. And they had to have a woman. They already had one black person, so, but it was a man. So he was a man. So I was the token woman, and that was how I got my foot in the door. Huh. And we tried to organize a union there. And then,
as soon as you got there?
No,
You started
probably the
causing-
second year.
Yeah.
Second year.
So when you came in, there's one black person and then there's you. Were your
The guys were
co-workers pretty
The
decent?
guys were
to you?
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guys were very nice. I didn't have any problems there at all that way. They thought it was kind of an oddity,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but it was nice. And there was the trouble I started, I guess you could say, is with the assembly room department. There's a poem in that Hardhome and Hardhat's book about the assembly women. It was something like out of the 1920s or something. They were in this small room that was super, super dark, and they were assembling little itsy-bitsy electric carbon brushes and then putting this wire in the end of it and not talking. Because the woman foreman, there was a woman foreman, would not allow anyone to talk. And even at lunchtime, these women would sit by themselves. And the washroom that they had to use, and that I had to use too, because it was the only woman's washroom, right, had no doors on it. Because she didn't want doors on the bathroom because she wanted to make sure they were just in there going to the bathroom and then coming out right away. So I made a super fuss about that. Because now I have to use the bathroom too, and hey, I'm a woman too, even though I don't work in the assembly department.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically said that's illegal, you can't do that. And because they needed me in the machine department to do the government work that I was doing on the little tiny engine lathe, they put doors on the bathroom. And so that was the one thing that I'm proud of that I was able to do, because we weren't able to do anything about a union.
Did you have meetings?
We had one meeting at my house. There was probably 10, 15 people at the meeting.
These are the machinists, not the women.
There was a machine department, an assembly department, a cutting room department, a warehouse. The cutting room department was all African Americans. Very, very hard work. I mean, carbon metal is like this gray stuff that's like, when you cut it, it just throws off this dusty, gray, icky stuff in the air. It was horrible. And they expected them to cut small pieces of it because they didn't want to waste any. Mm-hmm. So that means that their fingers would go very close to the cutting blades, and there was many accidents in there, many accidents. I forgot where I was talking.
You were talking about a meeting in your
Yeah, we had
house.
a meeting, and
representatives from the different parts of the company came?
Yes, and it was they were very skeptical that it was going to work, but they wanted to see what the union organizer had to say. And the guy what is that? There's a lefty kind of union. What the heck was that? It wasn't. It had machinist in it, but it wasn't that. I can't remember the name of the union. That was the only union we could get interested in us. Because it was a small place. It's probably only 200-300 people in the place. So anyway, the next day after the meeting, I was laid off immediately. So
how did they know that?
Because somebody there must have told one of the people there. And you can see the side of especially women, like the assembly room women, and maybe some of the older guys, maybe because it was a feudal system. They did have some very good paternalistic or something kind of benefits. Mm-hmm. Like sandwiches were 5 cents in the cafeteria. What else? I think it was the sandwich thing. People really liked the fact that they could buy a 5-cent sandwich. So that was going to...
made them loyal. That was enough to
right.
instill
right. Interesting.
loyalty.
Very
It is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. But the people, I came back about 2 or 3 weeks later to get my toolbox, and they had told me, the workers had told me, oh, you're never going to get unemployment, because even though they laid you off, they're going to say something. You're not going to get unemployment. So when I got my first unemployment check, which was pretty fast, I remember, I went back there and I said, look, got my unemployment check. Hellwig can't stop me from getting an unemployment check. And I'm taking my toolbox, and good luck. So, yeah. Oh, and the other thing we got, there was 2 other women there that worked. Where did they work? Warehouse, I think. They were warehouse women. They were younger women. They didn't like wearing these snood type. It was a hat that they made women wear that had a beak on it, like a baseball cap, but the back of it was all net, and they had to put their hair inside the net, and then and the men in those days there was men with long hair. This was hippie time we're talking about now already, so it was like the early 70s,
Mm-hmm.
So men with long hair wore baseball caps. They didn't wear the snood thing. So these 2 women really hated the snood thing, and they said, well, you got the bathroom door. See if you can get.
Change the rules about the hair.
Yeah, to change the rules about the hair. So the way I did that was I said it's discrimination. Men, you either make the men with long hair wear them, or not. So the men with long hair absolutely says absolutely not. We are not going to wear those
Right.
things. So the women could wear baseball caps. So it was funny. It's things that I remember about Hellwig. And Hellwig is like a big giant company in Milwaukee now. Because I went on the internet and looked it up the other day, just to see if it was still there.
Strong.
Yeah. So, and there was one woman there who was a tool grinder, and all the men in the machine shop gave their tools to her to grind, because she was so good at grinding tools. And she also ran a machine in the corner of the machine shop, like every once in a while. Tilly was her name. She'd come in and she'd run this machine that they called the Fleckenstein. Honest to goodness, Fleckenstein, after the man who invented it. And it was a machine that they would feed a carbon metal bar. Like if you took the lead out of a pencil, and it would be this, but only fatter, only real long, and it would feed it into it, and it would chop it up in littler pieces and spit it out the other side. So she had a little hammer, and she would start the machine, and then she would tap at it in different ways to make sure whatever she did to this thing, she was the only one that could run it. So Tilly, I kept telling Tilly that she should say that, and she knew how to run the machines, but they never would let her do it. And so she was really glad I was there doing it. She wasn't jealous or anything. Mm-hmm. She was just really glad. And so I said, Tilly, you can run any machine here. Tell Hellwig that you want to get machinist pay, and not just for the Fleckenstein. Just you're good. You're better than anybody here. No, I can't do that. Well, one day she comes to me and she says that she put in for vacation because she's going to go back to Czechoslovakia or someplace, or Yugoslavia, some country. She's going to take a month's vacation, and Hellwig had approved it, and she was real happy about it. And then he told her no, because she has to run the Fleckenstein. so she said, I bought my ticket. I said, you go in there and you tell him that you will train somebody else to run the Fleckenstein. This is ridiculous. You got the money, you bought your tickets, everything. So she did it. She went in there and she told him, no, she's going on her trip and she's going to train me to run the Fleckenstein. So I had to run this stupid machine, which was really funny. But she told me all the little tricks and where to tap at the hammer and everything. And the other thing I remember about Tilly, because she did go on her trip, and she brought me a present. She brought me a little deer that when you look into the little hole inside the feet of the deer, you saw some cathedral. And so and sort of to give me that, she would ask me to come over to her house. So I followed her home in my car, and she said she had a basement that was turned into like a rec room kind of. It was like a little bar in the corner and stuff. And she said she cans cherries, and she cans the cherries in Slivovitz, which I did not know what Slivovitz was in those days, but it's this really powerful, very high-proof alcohol stuff. And so she gives me a big bowl of these cherries, and they were delicious. I got so drunk that I could hardly drive home. I was, funny. Oh my goodness. But anyway, that's an aside. So
what did they make at the?
They made they made electric brushes. It's not really a brush like a paintbrush. It's a component for a motor. And it's the electric component thing, and I really don't understand it completely myself.
Okay.
But
got it.
Yeah.
So you got laid off, you got unemployment, and how old were your children while you were doing this work?
By this time, they were all at school. They were probably, the oldest one was, well, my ex left. The oldest was 13, and the youngest was 5.
So who took care of them when they came home from school or before school? Did they leave before you did in the morning?
Well, when I got a job, I always worked during the daytime. Mm-hmm. So not always, but in the beginning I worked during the daytime. So they basically stayed at school all day,
So you would get home about when they did?
So I would get home about when they did.
Okay.
But in this period of time, I started having help because I had met Larry after my divorce and stuff. So Larry ended up moving in with the kids' approval. We had like a family meeting, because he had been coming over on a regular basis, bringing food and everything for the kids, which they loved. But so after Hellwig, I think, when I got to work, the next job I got was Allis Chalmers. And by the time I was at Allis Chalmers, Larry had already moved in. Oh. So even though I did have to work shift work at Allis Chalmers, which was a big, it was a UAW shop. It was, and I worked there for maybe 3 years before big giant layoffs were happening. When I was working there was 10,000 people, and then by the time I got laid off, there was only like 3,000. It was like,
that's dramatic.
Oh, well, before 10,000, there was 20. I mean, It was a gigantic place in West Allis. Very, very strong union fight back history. I mean, it's like they sent in the National Guard and everything in strike against strikers, and they occupied their plant, and it was a big thing.
But that was before your
That was before
time,
me.
Right?
Oh yeah.
So when you got that job, you joined the union.
Yeah. It was a closed shop.
Yeah.
You had
okay.
to.
And were you active in the union?
Yes, I got elected steward pretty quickly, maybe like 7, 8, 9 months after I was there. I helped this guy with a union grievance, Bob Greasehopper. His name was Greasehopper. And he was a working class intellectual. He had he hadn't gone to college, but he went to the library all the time and had done research on nickel plating. And the department that we were in did a lot of nickel plating, and there was tons of fumes. And all they did was give us a fan to blow the fumes around.
Right.
Not out, just around.
Yes.
Not neutralize them, just, okay. So he had been doing nickel plating for years, and he was getting a lot of sores and everything, and so he basically looked into it, and he said, Sue, I don't have very long to go, because it's a carcinogen, and I'm going to get cancer. And he said, we got to do something about this. So in those years, this is when a lot of different lefty organizations thought that it was a good idea to go into factories to see if they could organize people. So there was every kind of political brand in there. I mean, there was socialists and Trotskyists and communists and everybody. And they didn't work together very well. I tried to get some of them involved in this nickel plating thing because it's serious. But they were just as stupid as management, in my respect. And the backward guys. If you're not getting your hand chopped off on something, cancer in their mind was too ethereal or something. It's not. You have nothing to show for it. I don't know what they were thinking. So what Bob did, he didn't trust me to write a good grievance. And I told him, I said, I can't write a good grievance on this because I don't know as much as you know. So you write it out, and I'll submit it as the grievance. And what we wanted was basically an exhaust system, because we didn't know, the stuff they know nowadays on how to make it so that when the cloud of smoke goes up in the air, it's still okay for the community. We were just dealing with the shop floor smell.
Right.
And so the union didn't want to go anywhere with it because they said it's unwinnable. There's no way that it's going to get, and it's not that important. So I told Bob that I read the contract. One of the things in the contract was that if the union itself, the union officers, won't do anything with your grievance, you have a right to go to the annual meeting and stand up with all the members and basically present your case there. So Bob came all dressed up in a suit, and he stood up, and I introduced him because I was this union steward as Mr. Greasehopper is going to present his own grievance. So he presented it. And
this is to the union.
This is to the union members.
All the delegates at the annual convention.
That wasn't a convention, it was an annual meeting. They had these big annual meetings. They were very, very important. And this was a packed hall. I would say maybe more than 1,000 people. Every single one of those people stood up and said, take that grievance. There wasn't anybody that said not. So that's how we got the...
He must have done a good job.
Yes. He was very, very good.
That's impressive.
So, yeah.
So then you took the grievance to the company.
Oh, yeah, right.
And what happened?
Well, the company knew that the stuff was a carcinogen. And the way they knew was that their own doctor had written a fucking paper on it. Really? So there wasn't... All the company needed, or whatever, to do the change is for the union to say, do it. So yeah. So we got it. The way I got hired at Allis Chalmers didn't want to hire me. The way I got hired was I filed an EEOC complaint because I had been going down there to apply over and over again, and they were doing tons of hiring, and they were hiring all men. And the reason I found out it was all men is because I knew, I can't remember her name. There was a union, what do you call, a union officer, I guess. She wasn't a steward, she was in the office. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what her title was. But she told me, she gave me the list of hires for the 4 or 5 months that I had been applying.
Ooh, that's helpful.
And I took that down to EEOC. And I said, they're hiring men to sweep floors. I was a housewife for many years. I know how to sweep a floor. So then the company had to interview me, and then I passed the interview, and then the company sent me to the what do you call it, medical exam, the physical.
Right. Okay.
And so at the physical, they thought that they could get rid of me at that point because I was a small woman and I probably had back problems because I had so many babies. This was what the guy told me. So you're never going to pass the physical. So at the physical, what they did is they took so many x-rays of my back and my front, I probably glowed by the time I was done. But I passed. So I was put on a 90 work day probation, which is what everybody's on. Mm-hmm. So when I started work, and they also put me in an apartment that was all men about ready to retire who didn't really want any waves made of any kind or anything happening. They just wanted to come and do their job and go home at night and not worry about not worry about a woman, for one thing, messing with their machines or doing something or other. So I had to win those guys over. So I won most of those guys over, and to the point of they telling me, don't sign anything that the company wants you to sign off your case. Because if you sign off on your complaint, my EEOC complaint, that because I got hired, the company guy, the HR guy said, well, here, you're hired. Here's a piece of paper. Sign this. You got your job. No, I'm not going to sign anything. So then they said because of the 90-day thing, they could fire me for no reason.
Right.
And the union couldn't protect me. So on the every night, because I was on second shift, every night the HR guy would come down the steps and wave the thing in the air for me to sign. That was his job. And I would just say, no, I'm not going to sign it. And he'd go off and go home or whatever. So on the last day, I just waved at him, and he waved at me, and that was it. So I kept the job, you know. And there was only one guy there that was really awful, and he didn't want me there. And he wasn't ready to retire. But he was such a jerk. He had binders. This is the funniest. It's Romney talking about his binders full of women.
Yeah.
This is funny. He had Dick. His name was Dick. Had binders full of pornographic pictures of women, and women with animals, women with just awful. And he would pick a picture of the day and put it on top of my toolbox. That was what he would do. And I would just rip it up and throw it away and continue my job, you know. But one night I came to work and he was still there. He was on first shift, I was on second. He was sort of standing around by his toolbox, like looking. And I came over to the machine that I was on, and this was an ongoing project that they had me doing. So I was the only one that was running this radio drill. It was like a 15-foot high machine. It was this big drill. The pieces we worked on were tractor housings. So they were huge coffee table size things.
Right.
And I had my setup all made. Everything was red. And I looked at him, and he had this really funny look on his face. And I looked at the machine, and I just had something told me, don't turn that machine on. And I reached out to touch the collet. The collet is this big thing that the drill fits into. I touched it, and it fell. So what would have happened if I had turned that on, I would have been killed. And that was it. I mean, the job, no matter what, wasn't worth my life. So I made a big fuss. I basically got the union involved. I said, you do something about Dick. I don't care about his stupid pictures, but he's not going to kill me. This is it, you know, and you're lucky I'm not calling the police. So what they did is they got him on this this other thing in the union contract of conduct on becoming a union member. Mm-hmm. And if they kick him out of the union, he automatically loses his job because it's a closed shop.
Right.
So that was it.
Good for them. Okay.
That got him off of my case. He was scared of me at that point then. But there's him, and there was one other guy at the railroad that was a similar kind of guy. But
was that your next job?
That was my next job.
Okay, so why did you leave?
Laid off.
Laid off.
Yeah, laid off thousands and thousands.
Huge layoffs. And
yeah.
How long did it take you to find another job? Did you have to file another EEOC?
No. The railroad was in a similar position. They were, as far as needing women, they had none. Milwaukee Road was in bankruptcy court, in and out, bankruptcy court, and it was getting federal funds to fix itself all the time. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I think I found out they were looking, that there was jobs open at the employment office, what do you call where you go get your unemployment checks, the EDD. I think it's called something else in Milwaukee. But there was lists of places that were looking for workers, and so the railroad was one of them. So I went down there and I applied, and because they needed a woman, and because by this time I had more than 5 years of machining under my belt, even though I didn't serve an apprenticeship. The reason I didn't serve an apprenticeship way back when was because they still had the age limit in, and I was too old to be an apprentice. Yeah, I think it was 18 to 25 or something like that, and I was in my 30s by the time I started all this. So that's how I got at the railroad, and because I had been working on giant tractor housings and stuff, they knew that I wasn't afraid of train wheels and train axles.
And so where you worked was on wheels and axles?
Yes, I worked in the wheel shop, and the wheel shop made new wheels out of rough castings, and then remachined axles and wheels off of train wrecks. So we'd get piles of that kind of stuff. So I ran what they called a journal lathe, which was a machine that fit the axle in, big, giant, long engine lathe. They called it a journal lathe. And then you had to remachine the part of the axle that the wheel is going to sit on. Mm-hmm. And so that it was to the right tolerance. And mostly, there was a really nice foreman there, Ray Fliggy. And Ray was an old school, very polite gentleman kind of man. Mm-hmm. And I think they put me in the wheel shop because none of the other giant shops in the valley wanted a woman. And it was too much trouble in their heads that I wouldn't be able to do the job in the first place, and then the other men wouldn't be able to do their job because they'd be staring at my ass all the time. I mean, who knows what goes on in their stupid brains?
Right.
So, but Ray, the people in Ray's shop, the wheel shop, were just a kind of a bunch of everyday working class guys, and they thought I was a curiosity, but when they realized that I didn't flirt, I didn't wear tight clothes, I basically knew how to do the work, they're like, so what? Yeah. And so I think I was accepted, you know.
And this was an IAM?
This was IAM, yes.
And so you joined the IAM?
Yes, I joined the IAM, absolutely. I went to union meetings. I could not get them to say brothers and sisters. Sister. It was like, you know, welcome, you know, pound the gavel, meeting call to order, welcome brothers and soup. They couldn't say sister. They just couldn't say it. And the union president was this really nice guy who I urged to run, you know, because the union president before him wasn't very good at all. And so Don would have good ideas. I said, well, Don, why don't you run? You know, he said, oh, nobody's going to let me. I said, they will, because they want somebody different. So I think you would. So I thought, if Don gets in, he'll say sister. It just couldn't come out. But they were really nice. And then I think the guy that was problematic there, that was like Dick at Allis Chalmers, was a guy named George. And George had a problem with everybody. He really couldn't get along with people. But he really, really did not like it. He was an apprentice. And so I basically was one of the machinists that trained him. And he...
That didn't sit
Oh, my goodness, that was so terrible. So what he did to me, to get rid of me, which didn't work either, but what he tried, was there was a big rack of axles that was probably 25 feet in the air. And then the axle, there was a machine, or not a hydraulic lift thing that would, when the axle rolled to a certain spot, then the operator would let it down slowly, and then it would be going into the wheel press, which is the axle in the middle, and then the two wheels on the side would press into it to mount the wheels, the train wheels. And so you'd have to go up there every once in a while because they'd get caught. And so you'd have to take this pry bar and loosen them. So you climbed up this metal ladder to get there. And so I was up on top doing that, and I saw George kind of walking around, but I didn't pay any attention to him. So on my way down the ladder, he had put grease on the ladder rungs.
Oy.
So I fell. And I got a concussion. I got my shoulder, what do you call it? Dislocated. And I was off work for maybe 2-3 months, something like that. But he got beat up pretty bad for doing that, because the guys could see that he was the only one that was laughing. Like, because I screamed, and then people came running, and he was standing there laughing. And so they just assumed, just as I had assumed, nobody else would have. There was no grease on the ladder when I went up.
Right.
So.
But he didn't get reported, or to the.
Well, Ray Figgy was gone by this time. So the 2 or 3 foremen that were there did not want to get involved in it at all. And they just said nobody saw anything. So what happened, George basically transferred himself out. And by the time I came back, he was gone to a different shop, yeah.
So the men that you worked with?
Yeah, they took care of it.
Took care of him without any official
intervention
on either the union or the company?
Yeah, you could put it that way, yes. yes, you could put it that way.
Ay.
Yeah, right. So I'm working on a new book called Shop Rags, and so this and a couple other, quite a few other stories about the guys I worked with are the
going
railroad.
to be in the book.
Yeah,
Oh, good.
yeah.
All
So
right.
that's nice.
So how long did you stay there?
Almost 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah, and I would have stayed longer, but the railroad finally closed. The Milwaukee Road got bought by the Sioux Line. And so I was trying to get my 10 years in because 10 years would have been vested rights. And then I would be able to get a railroad retirement, which was really great.
Yeah.
But, so Don, the union president, said that the Sioux Line would be hiring people that are too young to retire, but you have to move to Minneapolis. So that's where the Sioux Line was, St. Paul. So I did not want to live in Minneapolis and St. Paul. So I figured, well, I'll just take the layoff and I'll find something else. And then Don came up with this idea. The IAM union president talked to the IAM union president at the Sioux Line. And he said they don't have women there, and the company doesn't want women. So if I say that I'm transferring there, they'll probably give me a buyout. And because there was 25 machinists, there were 13 unions at the railroad, and there was 25 buyouts for each of the crafts that was negotiated with the bankruptcy court and the Sioux Line or whatever.
Okay.
So I was like number 26 or 27 on the list. So I wasn't going to get a buyout, which was like $25,000. It was a lot of money. So Don said that if I go there and I don't like the work, or they don't like me, or whatever, there's a very good chance that they will offer me a buyout, even like they'll go around the agreement somehow,
Right.
which just shows you how much these agreements are accurate, put it that way. So I got a hotel room in St. Paul, Minnesota. I did it. I went there. I moved there. My husband at this time, I was married to my second husband, and he was completely against it. This is awful. How are you going to do this? I said, well, I'll see what happens. You know, we're not going to move. Don't worry. The kids were all gone on their own by this time. There was no. It was just my husband and I. So the job was awful. The job was there was no machinist work. So it was really heavy labor work. Mm-hmm. And it was taking a sledgehammer behind a guy who was with a cutting torch that was chopping pieces, like we were demolishing boxcars. So he would he would cut like a slice of boxcar, and then I would come with my sledgehammer and pound it loose, and it would fall to the floor, and then the laborer behind with a giant wheelbarrow would put it in the wheelbarrow and haul it off. So that's what we did, night after night after night, because I was on second shift. There was no women's bathroom. By this time, I had decided I don't really want this job, but I'm not going to quit. So I made every mistake possible that a woman is supposed to make if she wants to keep a job. I insisted that I have a bathroom. I insisted that I have a locker spot. Because there wasn't any of this.
Right.
And they didn't have any bathroom. They said, well, the nearest woman's bathroom is down the train tracks about 2 blocks, and there's a tower there that women clerks work in, and so there's a bathroom there. But this is nighttime. And I said, okay, that's fine, but the foreman, you're going to have to walk with me, because not only don't I know where this is, it's in the dark, and I can't see anything. So I make the foreman walk with me to the toilet 2 or 3 times. saw a wooden crate with a toilet in it when I came to work. I thought, oh, okay, they're putting in the toilet. This is it. They're going to keep me.
Accommodate.
They're going to come. This is it. So the three of us are doing our thing. He's cutting. I'm pounding. The guy behind me is loading. And the foreman comes up and he said, Miss Doro, may I ask you something? And I said, what? He said, why didn't you take a buyout when they offered you a buyout back in Milwaukee? And I kept on pounding my sledge, and I said, wham, wham, because I didn't wham, wham. I didn't qualify. And he said, you mean to tell me you would take a buyout? And I said, I would consider it. And with that, another hunk fell really close to his feet. And so he decided he'd
Step back.
So he came back a half hour later. He said, tomorrow morning, when you're done with your shift, which would be, it wasn't in the morning. Maybe I was on nights. Maybe I was on third shift. Anyway, the next morning, go to the Sioux Line office, and they'll have a check for you. And so that's how my husband and I got to California.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and that was it. I felt it was kind of. I felt in one respect that I wasn't doing women a favor by being such a blockhead, insisting on those things and not really
And trying to
make it, that kind of thing. But then I found out that they didn't hire any more people, and period. And so there wasn't any woman behind me that was going to get hired at the Sioux Line, because the Sioux Line also went belly up. So that's, but yeah.
That's quite a story.
Ugh.
So during those 10 years, you went to IAM meetings and were active in the...
Oh yeah, very active in the union. They didn't really have, there was no union steward for the shop. There was kind of a union steward sort of around, and I'm sorry to say he wasn't very good. The president, Don Hogue, was really good. He was the guy in our shop. He worked at the machine next to me. And when all the bankruptcy stuff was happening, and he would really try and find out through upper level, any place he could, what was happening, and tell people as best he could. He was very good. He was very good. So, and then I was on the safety committee. I was on several other committees of the union. Yeah. So.
And people worked effectively with you?
Oh yeah. The George was the only jerk.
Just one.
Yeah. He was the bad apple. And usually, through the years that I worked, usually the guys that were the really down in the dirty whatever sexists were men that really didn't get along with the other men that good either.
Yeah.
They were just sort of oddball braggers, and there were men that would surprise you, and then say something that like, well, why are you here? Those kinds of things. But they didn't take an active role in getting rid of you or anything. They just, like there's this one guy, Freddie Dorwich, and he was a really old guy, and he ran one machine in the shop, and it was a gear cutter, and it said that's all he ever did. That's all I ever saw him do, and he had to go out on medical leave, and so the foreman said, go down and see Freddie. Freddie's going to show you how to run the King mill because he's going on medical. So I went down to see Freddie, and he had always said hello to me, that he didn't talk very much to anybody. And he just kept on running the machine. He didn't say anything to me. And I said, "Hi, Freddie, I'm here. Ray says he wants me to learn the kingdom." And he shut the machine off, he looked at me, and he said, "You don't belong here. My kid wants a job here, and you took his job." And I said, "Freddie, when I got hired, there had to be at least a dozen people, and they were all men, except me. Why am I the one that took your son's job?"
Right.
I mean,
Good
just think
question.
about this.
Right.
And are you going to train me? And he says, "I don't care what you do." So basically, all that day, I just watched him work. He wouldn't tell me what he was doing. He wouldn't show me. He wouldn't do anything. And so the next day, I came to work, and there was no Freddie. So that was my training.
Wow.
The hard part of that was getting the gears to the machine. And I had watched Freddie enough in the time I was there to see how he did it. But until you got the gear up to the machine, you had to roll a gear like a wheel. Only the gear teeth were not in good shape because these were off a train wreck, right? So if you were trying to roll it, if you were trying to roll a wheel across the cement, it wouldn't be wobbling around. If you're trying to roll a gear that has bad teeth,
It's not going to go.
it's not going to
straight.
go.
Yeah.
So you have to be really, really careful, and you have to, and if the cement floor was an uneven floor to begin with, it wasn't nice cement like in a garage. It was old and crappy. So if you saw it start to fall, what you had to do is jump out of the way. Just, you can't catch it. It's like a 500-pound thing you're trying to roll.
Right.
And once you get it to, no, maybe not 500. It's up what a train wheel was. It's a couple of hundred. It's real
very
super heavy.
Yeah.
But once you got it to where the machine was, then there was a crane that picked it up and put it in the machine. But yeah, and Freddie didn't come back, so I don't know what kind of surgery the poor guy had.
Huh.
But that's what I mean about the sexism part. They don't blame company for not integrating women and men to begin with. They don't think that way. Women don't belong, and that's it. There's a closed piece of their mind. It's like racism. It's just there's a closed piece of brain
So that even though all the evidence in front of them says something else.
Yeah, well, it's not. It's its own religion, I think. It's because religion can be a kind of a fairy tale sort of thing anyway, and so I think racism and sexism are like that. They make no sense. They make no sense.
When you first started talking about being at the railroad job, you said, there was this one guy who caused you great harm,
Yeah.
but everybody else was pretty decent.
Yeah.
But then later on you find out that there's at least one other person who's refusing to teach you something.
Right, and there
really
was
basic.
more than one.
So it makes me wonder whether a lot of other people got along with you on a certain level, but
Yes.
continued to hold their beliefs.
Exactly. Oh yes, I didn't change those men's minds. Maybe some of them. Some of them. I mean, we became very good friends. I mean, their wives and my husband, we'd go out together, after like on a Saturday night and stuff like that. So very, very good friendships were made. But there'd be these surprising moments, like with Freddie, and there was another guy, I don't remember his name, always joking around and friendly and everything. And then when the layoffs were going to happen, when it came down to their pocketbooks that they thought I was somehow taking away something or
You didn't deserve the job
Yeah,
as
right.
much as they did.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it's still alive and well.
Mm.
I mean, because I've talked to enough women, and I was when I worked at the OFCCP when I came to California, I had all the jobs I had, including the newsletter that I edit. I've always had friends and relationships with women in the trades.
Mm-hmm.
So I think some things have gotten better, more acceptance, and on the other side of it, more women not giving a damn if they're accepted or not, because who cares? They're going to stay in that job no matter what, and they're just going to watch out for themselves. And to men that have changed, which is good.
Even though there's still a ways to go, a bit of a ways to
Well, I think when the economy is bad, the women are supposed to work in the women's unquote quote unquote job, and the men are supposed to work where the money is.
People will come up with any reason to where they deserve the job as opposed to somebody else if the economy's bad.
Yeah, that's right.
Sexism is.
Yeah, and I think I wrote an article about, somebody asked me to write something about what it's like now, and so one of the positive things, well, there's several positive things. The main positive things is that the young women that are getting into the trades now have this herstory behind them, that they know that they not only deserve the job they're in, that women before them, ever since Rosie the Riveter and before Rosie, are very capable and can do these jobs, and who cares what the men think. So they're more tattooed, they're more feisty, they're more tough, and when they go home at night, if they want to paint their fingernails or put fake fingernail polish on or whatever and go out and have a good time, they do that too. They're really good at living in both worlds, the girly world and the tradeswoman world. It's really neat. I love that. And the other thing that I think is important is we do know how much television affects our thinking. And there are more women now on the house repair shows. In fact, a woman just won, there was a show, a competition show of a whole bunch of carpenters, and who's going to be the journey, I think it's the journeyman of the year or something like that.
Right.
And this last one they just had, there was 3 women in the group, and a woman won.
Oh, no kidding.
For the first time, yes. So
I think things like that also.
that's right. Now we know
have an
that
impact.
there's still only little more than 2% women in the trades in the country. I mean, that hasn't hardly changed. So just getting women on TV is not equal to there aren't enough women working in these jobs because they're not being hired. But in my mind, it's progress. So that's it.
Good thing. And you came to California, and
We came to California, and I tried to get a machine shop job. There wasn't that many jobs available. I did get one for a day at a job at a company in downtown Oakland called Union Machine, except it wasn't
a union job.
It was no union.
dear.
So, and it was the woman who owned the factory had just inherited it from her father, and he had died. And so she was really excited about having a woman work there. She was really neat. So the first day was up to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was fine. They just gave me the blueprint. They showed me the machine, and that was it. I just started making the parts. And I could see the guys weren't talking to me, but I figured that was par for the course, so who cares? I'll just do my job and win whatever ones I can win over and whatever ones I can't win over, who cares? So it came to the end of the day, and she came up to me and she said, "Sue, I'm really sorry, but you can't work here." And I said, "Why? What's going on? I did the job." And she said, "No, you do really good work." Her setup man said that he was going to quit if I kept working there. And she needed the setup man because he was the one that knew all the blueprints for everything.
And she didn't know.
And she didn't know.
Have a backup.
Exactly.
Ah.
So she gave me a ride home. And then I was looking for work. And my husband said, "You need to expand the kinds of jobs you're looking for." And he had seen the Tradeswomen Inc. job ad in the paper. And what Tradeswomen Inc. was looking for an executive director.
Huh.
And what they wanted an executive director was somebody that could give advice, talk on the phone to women that would call up with problems, do a newsletter.
Back to newsletters.
Back to newsletter. And do bulk mailings, get volunteers, just do everything, because there was no staff. It was the executive director ran everything, and then the board was your boss, like was the whole board. So that I got the job, and that led me out of blue collar work.
Right.
Yeah, which I missed because a couple reasons. There was a camaraderie that was in blue collar work that is like no other. And then the second reason is when you were done working, you were done working. You go home. But when you have a job like that, there's all these little extra things and meetings you have to go to. It's different. It's a different animal. So I had that job for almost 3 years, and it was supposed to be a part-time job, but I think it was like 4 days a week. It didn't pay very well because they didn't have money. Because I was also a grant writer, so it was hard to get grants, but I did get some grants. Then I found out there was another organization called Women in Apprenticeship. So I got a part-time job at Women in Apprenticeship. So I worked both of those jobs, Tradeswomen Inc. and Women in Apprenticeship. And then Madeline Mixer, who back then was the federal government Department of Labor Women's Bureau regional director in San Francisco. She told me, and I knew her from the tradeswoman job because she has been like a driving force in the Bay Area of helping fund tradeswomen type organizations and helping women get money for tools. She's done a tremendous amount of work. Somebody should interview Madeline, really.
What's your last name?
Mixer,
Madeline.
Mixer. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, she's incredible. Anyway, she told me about the Department of Labor OFCCP job, the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs. So they were looking for compliance officers. So I filled out a 9-page or 15-page application at the for that job, and she put in a good word for me. But the final decision was my life experience, because I had all this experience, and they were looking for somebody who could do a lot of construction reviews, compliance reviews, EEOC, EEO, affirmative action compliance reviews for federal contractors. That,
So that's right up your alley.
so that was up my alley.
Yeah.
So that was the next job. And that was a full-time job. So I had to quit the other 2 jobs to take that one, and that was a great job. I got a lot of back pay for women and minority males when they were being screwed over by some reason or other by the company, because